Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm Captain James Bollinger, and you're currently watching the Sussex Smuggler YouTube channel, widely available across Facebook pages, groups, and more widely available if, of course, you like and share it for your friends and family to watch, and fellow historians. Just trying to straighten up a week here, it's not quite on properly. I really should get these things ready before I come live on air. But look, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on here again this evening on this broadcast, watching across YouTube and anywhere else, I suppose, it could be picking this up and Facebook and whatnot. So yeah, all good. So welcome. I'm Captain James Bollinger, as I've already said, and this is the Sussex Smugglers broadcast. Of course, you can find the blog, the sussexsmuggler.co.uk, where we've been talking about a lot about local history in the Kent and Sussex areas, such as the Hawkhurst gang, and that's what we're talking about tonight. And we'll just get a few bits and pieces up and running. Where did it all start, and what is smuggling really on the south coast? How did the Hawkhurst gang come about? A few bits and pieces that I've missed off, and of course I'd like to pay tribute to all the admins on Facebook that allow me to post the blog. The idea was to make a blog for local history in Kent, Sussex, Hampshire and Dorset, and anywhere else I might go on my casual travels that happen to take place. And of course picked straight up living in smugglers' country on the Hawkhurst gang. So I got to work on that as a lot of books and the visual history is still around at the moment. So, but without it, the blog and this broadcast wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for people like Annie B of the History of Sussex group on Facebook, Hyman J. Chalk as well, he sent me some excellent material, and Ian Wright, who emailed in with a valid point that will hopefully, if I can remember, I've got my notes, we'll get on to a bit later on. Of course, but we are live, so anything could go wrong, as it possibly will do. We'll just pick up and go with the flow, relax. It's not a formal affair, but there's a few things that I willfully left off on the blog when they were published, and it was just so we can have a discussion about certain things. To make a broadcast a bit more viable, if you like. So yeah, it's all good. So let's start off. I mean, how did smuggling come about? We've got to remember a lot of, in particular, Kent and Sussex and the southern counties, like pretty much anywhere else rurally, had a miserable life, and they were tied to the land, and they weren't really provided for by way of their needs, clothing, money, that kind of thing, food, and jobs were terrible. You'd work all the hours and for very little pay, and of course that was their luck, really. That was their life. So things started to happen. Now, just go back a few centuries, around the 12th century onwards, we had an abundance of sheep, and hence why we had we exported wool to the there they are. That's what started it off. The sheep. We started expanding to continental Europe for clothing, and then it evolved over the centuries into taxation. And then eventually, when we started fighting with France, of course, it was banned. But interestingly, it still went on. So it started with wool, we exported or smuggled the wool over the English Channel in for money, and of course goods that we needed, and that was still going on because let me just take that down, move it from the stream. Um, what I've managed to find out through the Old Bailey court papers, that anyone can access Old Bailey online, was that hang on, I consult my notes. John Cook was servant to Arthur Gray. That's it. He was servant to Arthur Gray. He was a Hastings lad. He was a loader and unloader of the beach port down there. Probably very heavy work, and he got mixed up with the Hawkhurst gang, and he told us in his trial at the Old Bailey, or post-trial, it was actually in his confession documents, because what he's trying to do is repent and not be executed at Tyburn. And of course, he's confessing all. I mean, his boss, Arthur Gray, he'd been hanged. He was in a gibbet on Stamford Hill. So what did he have to lose? So there he was, John Cook, very straightforward man, apparently, from all papers. He witnessed a lot of the goings on by Arthur Gray and tried to stop him, he said. I mean, he might have just been saying it to try and save himself, which you wouldn't blame him for. But what he did say was that they had several wagons of wool that they took down to the south coast. It's not specific where. They got some of the load off onto ships to France, but not all of it, because apparently he goes on to say that dragoons or soldiers stopped the rest of it. And then he goes on to say that they were paid by London finances. And as you know, people that haven't people that read my blog, you'll see in episode 1 that it makes a good mention of the actual people behind it. That never got done, that never paid their taxes, and never got prosecuted. And never got done. They never got prosecuted, and a lot of them were involved in the slave trade as well. And there could be one suspect as well in all of this, who I might be able to name a bit later on, and you'll find out. There's probably a hint in episode 5, the trio of murders by the Hawkhurst gang, for who it could be, because certainly they had residence in London. Good piece of historic source that was. So they did get in return for that load, apparently lace, silk, and other goods. So the wool exporting, is my point, or wool smuggling to the continent, was still going on and was being used as some sort of currency. And the Hawkhurst gang were ahead of it and were still carrying it out. So it gives you an idea. I mean, this is why I've done a bit of a broadcast, which will be going out as well, the repeat, going out live on Monday. Yeah, this coming Monday at 10 o'clock. We'll so those of you that have missed it today will get the repeat show on the Monday. That's where we are with that. So that gives you a very, and it is a brief outline, because you could probably spend hours on the subject. And that's why you have the Isle of Sheppey, apparently, because there's so many sheep on there. But that's what John Cook told in his confession before he was condemned at Tyburn for tax offences, smuggling, and probably a few other bits and pieces as well. So that rounds that off. Now I know I've already mentioned this, but I'll just put this up here. This is courtesy of the Pevensey Courthouse Museum that I had the privilege of visiting on Good Friday evening, but I'll get into that when we do the magazine show next Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Now, Ian Wright, I mentioned him before. I think he belongs to the History of Sussex Sussex Facebook group. He emailed me in and made a polite observation that I'm most grateful for, because I interpreted my reading. And there could be some merit to this, but I'm happy to give way on it. About a hanger. He academically argued that a hanger is what you see in the picture on the screen, a short sword with a slight curve in it. I think the one on the left I would describe as more of a hanger, as Ian actually describes. The picture, I'm not sure does it justice or not, I don't know, but have a look for yourselves, see what you think. So yeah, that's that there. Have a look at that. I was arguing that a hanger was actually a meat hanger, or what I found out yesterday at the Museum of London, Docklands, a cargo or a docker's hanger, which is a hook that you traditionally see portrayed in pirate films in Walt Disney as being attached to someone's arm to make them look a bit more menacing, like Captain Hook, for example. But yeah, there you go. That's there's a hanger sword, I would say, and you'll see that at Pevensey Courthouse Museum. More on that in tomorrow's show at 8 o'clock on Tuesday. And thanks to all the people that'll be watching, all the viewers watching this as a replay. So yep, there's the hanger sword there. Thanks, Ian, for that. Great contribution. I welcome contributions as long as they're constructive, and I'm sure everybody else does as well. And because I don't always get it right, I just don't, because I'm human. And when you read documents, it's down to your interpretation at the time of reading it. And remember that some of the spelling, the words, aren't necessarily what we use today. And even the clerks at the time might have been slightly illiterate. But let's look at some of the comments. Oh, Hearn Greenwood's out there saying, hello, dear friend. Hi, Hearn. Show that comment there. There goes Hearn Greenwood. Hello. Hi, Hearn. There's Hytham J. Chalk. Good afternoon, Hytham. Thanks for your contributions. A few other things. Let's have a look here what he's put about the tunnel. If you know someone with LIDAR, I know roughly where this tunnel was. I'm afraid I don't, but if anyone does out there, let Hytham know, because I'm sure he's as keen as mustard. He's as keen as me for research and finding these things out. So get in touch with him. He's open to contact. Right, yeah, those are some of the comments that we've had in already. Fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, so let's move on. I'll see what I've got on my notes, my agenda, because I can't remember everything off the top of my head. Yeah, let's have a look here. We'll get to that a bit later. We've done the hanger sword meat hook thing. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. What else have we got? Oh, yeah, we'll come to that later on as well. Quite a few notes here, watchers. How was your weekend anyway? Good? The weather can't make its mind up, can it? What we got here, right. Ah, yes, that's right. Now, in my blog, it mentions the War of Jenkins' Ear from 1739 to 1748, which really was to do with the War of Succession in Europe. Now, it's called the War of Jenkins' Ear because in the Caribbean Sea, I believe it was off the New Grenadian coast, that Spanish coast guards boarded a ship called the Rebecca, and they said that they cut the captain's ear off, who happened to be Captain Jenkins, and that's what started the War of Jenkins' Ear. It was actually called, you'll have to excuse my Spanish, Guerra del Ascencio, which probably translates into set in New Granada in the Caribbean Sea, I don't know. But over here, I'm sure the pamphleteers and early newspapers seized on it as a propaganda exercise to put Britain on a war footing with Spain, which was going to happen anyway. So it was actually about British ships evading duty and smuggling, and a lot of their cargoes included slavery as well. And the Spanish wanted to tax them on it, and it was a trade dispute that went militarily quite wrong. So that's a bit of a background to what was going on at the time. Of course, as I said in the blog, your ordinary working person on the farm or whatever they were doing in Kent and Sussex. I mean, we're taxed today to the hilt, to say the least, and so were they. And they probably didn't even know where these places were. They had no vested interest in these places, so they're probably feeling pretty perturbed, to say the least, about having to pay their tax and having a miserable lifestyle that they did. So, of course, they turned to smuggling to make their life better. And they not only lived in fear of people like the Hawkhurst gang and other gangs in Sussex and Kent, Hampshire and Dorset, and with all the other crimes that were going on as well, they became really dependent on them because they provided luxuries and essential items for them and protection as well, because the Hawkhurst gang had a level of governance in the counties as well as of southern England. You, as much as you hated them, you knew what you were getting, and that was their law or no law. So yeah, that just a bit of background as to what was going on at the time of the golden age of smuggling. I'm not sure if you can call it that. I don't know. I suppose you could. But we will. I mean, as the blog progresses, we'll touch on the other smuggler gangs and personalities because they're interesting people. Now, of course, the smugglers, the Hawkhurst gangs and the like, were playing at home, if you like. They knew the terrain, they knew the woods, the marshland along the southern coastlines, places like Pevensey, Romney Marsh, Walland Marsh, the forests that were around here, the woods, Ashdown Forest, the roads. They knew the terrain. And we've got to remember, with all these wars going on, the War of Ascension, the War of Jenkins here, there was a lot going on, and the British troops were mostly, and Navy, mostly stationed in foreign lands and waters. So there was a few home troops, dragoons, billeted along the south coast. I'm not quite sure of the numbers, but it can't be more than a few thousand. It can't be. It might not even be more than 1,000. Plus a smattering of riding officers and revenue officers, like the soldiers, poorly paid, and not motivated. I think I read as well that some of the soldiers were from the north and out of the area, so they probably sounding quite foreign to a lot of the the locals around here, and probably were viewed as such as well. So you had this large organisation ran like the Mafia by Arthur Gray until 1748, when Thomas Kinknell took over, active from the 1730s in Kent and Sussex and the south coast. He was leading it all up. So he was the main man. But the point is that they knew they were playing on home ground. And of course, the dragoons wouldn't have known the terrain and did so few, probably outnumbered in most scenarios, as you've seen and read in the blog, that they're outmanned and outgunned, not highly motivated, and probably just wanted to be at home like most people, trying to wish for a better life. And of course, then I know I keep going on about it, but the myth of smugglers' tunnels. Even where I live, there's claims of smugglers' tunnels. Everywhere you go, there's claims of smugglers' tunnels. You've got to think of a lot of places on the coast. Not all places are below sea level, of course. So if you dug a tunnel, it's likely to have flooded with seawater. And of course, if you could make a tunnel, where would all the waste rock and rubble go without you being noticed? I mean, I know people, probably whole towns and villages were in on that rock and rubble and the waste aggregate would have to go somewhere, and some riding officer or revenue or soldier would have noticed. And how would you actually construct it and maintain it? But that might not be the case. I'm hoping to be disproved on that. But one thing about tunnels is that in some of the books that are mentioned in the bibliography of the blog, is of course the overgrown trees and plants. But quite a few of them in Sussex. For example, the road reaching way up until a couple of weeks ago, that had to discussed with me, bad job of it. That would have been a tunnel and probably a short run of land, if you like, so a venue to venue tunnel, not something that's going on beneath your feet or anything like that. So an interpretation difference, probably with the evolution of English as well over time. So if you can find a tunnel, let me know. I'm not saying they didn't use caves, but caves are normally a natural formation. So caves are caves, aren't they? So watch the places like have a look at St Clement's caves in Hastings or the Margate caves, for example. They're a natural phenomenon that were used for smuggling because they're ideal hidey holes before they moved the stuff up in stages. But happy to be disproved on that. Let's see what people can come up with. It's all good. The other thing that I'd like to mention is the romantic poem by Kipling that heeds, I think, some good advice. Turn to the wall, my darling, as the gentleman came by. You wouldn't really want to trifle with these people. They were very, very nasty, violent people, probably and arguably psychopaths as well. Some of them. I mean, if you read into my blog about what they did to ashore custom officers, revenue officers, that's nasty work that they've done, and how they dispatched of James Marshall from Rye, never to be seen again. What happened to him? And these are the people, Galley, Chater, Hawkins, nasty, torturous, barbarous work that they did with those people. Terrible. I must admit, I think I've got a slide for this whilst we're on Hawkins. Richard Hawkins was murdered at the Dog and Partridge Inn in Slindon Common, Yepton, West Sussex. Now, as much as I love Weymouth, and I do love Weymouth in Dorset, there's a lot of fond childhood memories along that way. There's a pub there called the Black Dog. If you look at the screen, you'll see it, that claims the story of Richard Hawkins. And I'm afraid it's simply not true. However, we'll come to the Black Dog's defence. It wasn't Richard Hawkins that died or was killed at the Black Dog. It was actually a revenue officer from Weymouth that was killed at the Black Dog. But I suppose it looks good for the tourists, and it looks on the inside. I didn't venture into it. It looks to me like a good, an interesting pub, an interesting building. I would have taken more of a shot of it, but it had some scaffolding around it at the time. But what was of interest whilst I was attending the Pirate Festival at Weymouth, I came across this and photographed it. I'd share that another time, and here is that other time. Hopefully when I go back again for the next Pirate Festival, whenever that may be, I know that they're just waiting on the authorities of Weymouth to grant the okay. And do come down, it's an excellent event. I thought I'd take a picture of this and share it with you. So it didn't happen there, I'm afraid, but there was a revenue officer killed at the Black Dog. So if there's any paranormal investigators in the Weymouth area, there's a venue for you to have a look at. Likewise, as well, at the Dog and Partridge in Swindon Common, Yapton, West Sussex. Have a look down there, because I would imagine there's some interesting paranormal activity possibly in there. But, Richard Hawkins may have something to say about his death and his demise from the Hawkhurst gang. It was a horrible death. You can read about it on my blog. It's quite grim, and I can kind of see why. But I'm not quite sure at the same time. Some authors, modern authors, and then you'll see in the bibliography on the blog, have opted to leave some of these details out. Again, especially the Shoreham officer, that the details left out about that as well. A grisly death that was. So let's have a look here. What else have we got? I think we're coming close to the half an hour mark. I don't want to overrun because I don't want to lose people's attention. But I've got enough material here to be going on, but I don't need to be. I think we'll just stick to the salient points. Now, Arthur Gray had a brother called William Gray, and I understand as well that he was in Maidstone jail, and they broke him out of there as well. That was after the Battle of Goudhurst that you read about as well on the blog. Another interesting point, but it's not clear as to what happened to William Gray after that. I don't know if he went on and lived a life or what happened to him. I don't know. So if you come across something, do let us know. Email in. There's a contact form on the blog page there. Please use that if you want to. So what else have we got? Also, I understand that Butler, which was the nickname for Jeremiah Curtis, was in hiding along the route to Horsham with a few others of the Hawkhurst gang, and they actually wanted to hold up the judges going to the assizes at Chichester, who were going to try their mates, which is quite cheeky. They never did it, but they were contemplating it. Sure. Another interesting talking point. Okay, I mean the other. Let's have a look here. Of course, Jeremiah Curtis escaped from Newgate, headed for the port of London, and ended up escaping to Dunkirk, where he served for the French army in the Irish Brigade, and then he got smallpox, I think it was. It's in my blog anyway. Annie B sent a newspaper clipping in, and he died. There was a letter that arrived from Dunkirk that he died. I think it was a smallpox or something like that, around 1753, after serving in the Irish Brigade for the French. But of course, look, turning back to London finances, I mean, I'm not the first. And you'll read in the episode 5 of the blog who makes the allegation in his book, the Reverend Bishop, no relation to the next gentleman. So Cecil Bishop, who owned Parham House and Parham Park, where Richard Hawkins' body was found 9 months later after his disappearance and murder. He's an interesting character because not only did he turn up and petition for a pardon for Thomas Lillywhite. Now, some claim Thomas Lillywhite married his bishop's daughter. Other sources claim that he married the housemaid's daughter. Now, you draw your own inferences from this. I'm not quite sure, but my suspicions. He also had a property on the very wealthy Berkeley Square, number 11 Berkeley Square, London, and it's no longer there, the building, but obviously number 11 is there. It's a big office block or something there. But that was, if you had money, that's where you would live in London. So he had his London house at Berkeley Square because he was an MP, you see, and a baronet, very wealthy man. The body of Richard Hawkins turned up on his estate at his lake, which I do believe now is the pleasure pond. And it goes a bit further than that as well. It turns out that Sir Cecil Bishop was a Jacobite, which means that they weren't all necessarily, I've got to get this bit right, Catholic, but most of them were Catholic, and they supported King James Stuart, or Jacob as his real name was, back to the throne. And I understand that Sir Cecil Bishop's brother was trying to leave the country as a Jacobean via Pevensey and got arrested. So when you mix it all in politically, I mean, some would even argue that the Hawkhurst gang were Jacobites as well as being rogues, a bit like the golden age of piracy in the Caribbean. They were said to be Jacobean and favoured a Stuart king. These people were the same. I'm not quite sure how deep their political roots or beliefs went or were rooted. I don't know, but that's what's suggested. And of course, when you look at post Custom House raid, when the downturn for the Hawkhurst gang started its slippery slope downwards, when you look at the government, they couldn't have this lot running around. Not only were they not paying their taxes, they were running an absolute riot and amok around now the southeast region. What would in fact happen if the French had invaded? What assistance would they have provided to the French? And as I have said in the blog, there was nothing stopping these people riding on into London, into the Houses of Parliament, saying, right, we're running the show now. And I think often that's overlooked, and I'd love to see a professional author take that job on as analysing these sorts of things, because I think that's what they were honestly afraid of. And that's why they had to be crushed. And of course, when they were tried at East Grinstead, Chichester, and at the Old Bailey at London, they split them all up because it was made guarding them a bit easier. And the ones they wanted convicted, they took out to London to make sure they got convicted. They couldn't nobble the jury, and that's what they want. Sorry, I'm just going to change these around a bit. Take that one off. We'll leave the ticker running, and remember, like, comment, and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube. Follow the blog on the sussexsmuggler.co.uk. But getting back to that, there was a political will now to sort these people out. And once they chopped the head of the Hydra off, I'm not saying that of course that was the end of smuggling. It wasn't. It went on probably, arguably, for 300 years at least. I mean, in terms of goods, not about people. I'm not getting into modern politics at all. But in terms of the 18th century, I'd imagine that they'd only got probably a handful of them. A lot of the soldiers would just disperse into other gangs that we will write and talk about as time goes on. But there's other bits and pieces I want to have a look at. Once they dealt with the Hawkhurst gang, that was it. That's why you had the gibbets, which was a great declaration of state saying, we run it, that's now over, we're in control, the crown, that's it, end of. And that's why they erected the stone at Chichester. But there you have it. Those are my thoughts that I couldn't quite put down onto paper. And some I did deliberately left off. Some mistakes I put in to try and get some debate going. But look, that's me signing off now. Thanks for watching. I'm Captain James Bollinger. You've been watching the Sussex Smuggler YouTube channel. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Read the blog, www.thesussexsmuggler.co.uk. Follow me on Facebook. Thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow evening on Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Thanks a lot now. Take care. Bye. Oh, before I go, heed the warning. Watch the wall, my darling, as the gentlemen go by. Thanks very much. Good night. Bye.